We start tonight in Iran, where the country's Revolutionary Guard announced the, quote, end of the sedition after several days of deadly protests. At least 21 people have been killed in the past few days. And now French President Emmanuel Macron is getting involved. Macron said the statements by the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia risk getting dragged into war. RT correspondent Anya Parampil is here now with an update. So Anya, tell us, what is the latest situation with the demonstrations?
Thanks, Manila. It appears as though some of the more intense and violent demonstrations have died down, at least for now, as today thousands of Iranians took to the streets to show support for their nation and denounce violence. Protesters reportedly chanted, quote, "Leader, we are ready," and "death to seditionists," after several days of demonstrations in the country spurred by its dire economic situation. Iranians face rising prices for basic goods like food, as the nation has for years been a major target of crippling economic sanctions driven by the United States. Anti-government protests began peacefully but turned violent when crowds attempted to rush police stations with weapons, fire on police, and vandalize state property. Special interests have also attempted to ride the wave of discontent, with pro-Shah chants recorded in some crowds. The Mujahideen al-Khalq, or MEK, has also taken to the streets and received glowing attention from mainstream Western press. The MEK is a radical militant group in exile which has taken up arms against the Iranian government and launched several terrorist attacks, killing civilians, including Americans. For that reason, it was on the U.S. list of foreign terrorist organizations for 15 years. However, it was removed after cozying up with prominent U.S. politicians and running a lobbying campaign. In 2012, U.S. officials told NBC News they believed the MEK was responsible for the assassination of several top Iranian nuclear scientists, and that they were financed, trained, and armed by the Israeli Secret Service. Still, protests in the country Wednesday seem aimed at condemning violent attempts to overthrow the state, regardless of the legitimate economic grievances of the people. The head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, Mohammad Ali Jafari, said today riots, quote, are doomed to failure, and declared Iran is a target of the U.S. and its, quote, lackeys for its commitment to supporting oppressed people worldwide. The governments of Iran, Syria, the militant group Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Houthi rebels in Yemen make up what's called or referred to sometimes as the axis of resistance, and have successfully countered U.S., Israeli, and Saudi interests in the region, most recently when defeating U.S. and Gulf state-backed militants in Syria with the help of Russia. Still, regardless of the true nature or goal of these demonstrations, some powers are openly calling for regime change in Iran. President Trump tweeted today, quote, "Such respect for the people of Iran as they try to take back their corrupt government. You will see great support from the United States at the appropriate time." Vice President Mike Pence shared a collage of tweets consisting of statements from members of Congress celebrating the unrest, declaring, quote, "Protesters in Iran should know there's bipartisan support in America for the freedom-loving people of Iran who continue to fight against their government's corruption and tyranny." Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, who has long advocated for bombing Iran, chimed in to say, quote, "The fact there is a huge opposition to the regime in Iran has nothing to do with the U.S. There is economic discontent. The regime is more vulnerable than people think." He, of course, neglects to note the role U.S.-imposed sanctions may have played in damaging Iran's economy. What's more, the goal of U.S. policy towards Iran is no secret. As academic Louis Alday points out, it was openly reported in the Wall Street Journal just last June that the Trump administration established a new center within the CIA to, quote, turn up the heat on Iran, quote, reflecting the Trump administration's decision to make that country a higher priority target for American spies. To head the center, CIA Director Mike Pompeo tapped an officer named Michael D'Andrea, who's nicknamed the Dark Prince or Ayatollah Mike, according to the New York Times. The Times also reports D'Andrea's appointment was the, quote, first major sign that the Trump administration is invoking the hard line the president took against Iran during his campaign, adding, quote, Iran has been one of the hardest targets for the CIA. Meanwhile, the mainstream U.S. media continues to show enthusiasm for protests in Iran. On Tuesday, CNN International tweeted out an ask for participants to call into a hotline and tell the network what they were seeing and why they are participating. But oddly enough, there's been little coverage of demonstrators in Israel, where people have taken to the streets in recent weeks to protest Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for corruption. What's more, at least 30 people have been killed in demonstrations in Honduras over the past month in protests against the election in which the Organization of American States documented widespread fraud. No similar ask has been made by CNN International for tips from participants in either of those movements. So we ask here, Manila, why the double standard?
Thanks for that, Anya.